Hello, citizens of so called democracy. This is Brian Courtney with Short Bus Debate Club. Today we're going to talk about transnational capital. And, well, my co host, Darren Jolly, this is something that's near and dear to his heart, so I'll kind of let him do the intro and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, so we've been talking about a lot of bits and pieces of the system lately, whether it's prison industrial complex, militarized police, all these various different spaces. But what I want to do is kind of take a step back and take it up to a little bit higher level of abstraction. And the reason why I think it's important to do that is the way you understand something guides how you act in relation to it. So, like your knowledge of it, your knowledge of how it exists, your knowledge of how it reproduces itself, it informs your relationship to it. And if the thing that you're trying to have knowledge about is out of joint, so like if the thing itself does not reflect what you think you understand about it, then you're not really going to be able to be very effective when you're trying to interact with it.
Are you talking about the fact that we don't have the knowledge about the things we're supposed to be embracing or upset about? Or are you talking about the fact that most people are adults and they don't fucking understand?
Well, I don't even know that this is necessarily a adultish thing. I mean, so
the information isn't available to us.
Well, so if I'm in the context of transnational capital, I don't think that we really have an effective frame of understanding it or how it works. Like, if you don't have a way of understanding it, if you don't really understand how it exists, how it reproduces itself, how do you be an effective actor in trying to change that
okay,
thing?
So maybe I don't understand because I'm adult.
Uh-huh.
So transnational capital to me means I'm a corporation and I have multiple locations all over the globe. In addition to that, that means that I'm moving money around from place to place to where it finally comes back to home. And what I mean by home is wherever I want to park it in order to get the most benefit out of it. So tax breaks, I don't have to pay them if I park the money there. Interest rates, I get them better if I park the money there. That kind of thing. Is that what we're talking about?
Okay, so give me a minute, all right? Just let me go through it for a second, all right?
Okay.
It takes this is kind of big, so you at least have to give me enough space to kind of to get there. So when I think about transnational capital, all right, I think about the gold standard, all the stuff that developed out of World War II, the Bretton Woods agreements, right? Capital tended to tie in industrial ways primarily through the nation states. That does not mean that they didn't go to other places and have industries in those spaces, but still, an American company was generally speaking an American company. Ford was an American company, right? In 1970, right, when we went off the gold standard, we started to liberalize trade. We made it easier for capital to reorganize itself outside of the nation state at that point in time. So when that happened, it's not just that industry was reorganizing itself. It was that the political bodies that those industries went to had to reorganize themselves as well. And there had to be a consciousness inside of those actors that allowed for them to institute these strategies that protect their long-term financial positions. So what I'm suggesting is they're still using the nation state, but they've sort of decoupled from the nation state. So you can't really talk about General Motors as having an interest in the United States in the same way that you did in the 1950s.
Well, no, because none of these corporations, whether or not we consider them American or not, I mean, because these days, a lot of people would probably consider Toyota an American company. It's not an American company. I mean, America bailed it out. They were almost bankrupt at the end of when World War II was going on, but we bought a shitload of Jeeps, or maybe that was Vietnam. It was one of those wars that bailed Toyota out. I think it was World War II. Anyway, a lot of people might think of Toyota as an American company because they make a lot of Toyotas here. That's because of those tax breaks I was talking about. So with the way, and I think that this is the way most Americans feel, but I'm not sure. But with the way we are outsourcing our labor to third world inexpensive countries, I don't think that anybody thinks of any one company as being an American company anymore because none of their shit is made in America.
How did the Trump phenomenon occur then, though? I mean, all of this affinity towards U.S. this, U.S. that is rooted in a devotion towards and a lot of he had this.
I would call it mass hypnosis.
Okay, but there were things that were said that were actually policy things, right? I mean, he had a right-wing populist position that said we need to stop outsourcing this stuff. We need to reinvigorate industry, and whether you call it mass hypnosis or not, these are things that he said because they understood that there was a tendency in a certain direction and they wanted to reinvigorate it back in another direction. So I mean, I'm not so when I'm talking about strategy here, right? I'm not talking about whether or not people have a consciousness about whether or not companies are simply tied to the United States anymore. I'm talking about the reactionary position that developed out of these people in 2016 was, these sort of like rhetorical, like pseudo-fat, like light wing, starting to get heavier wing fascist tendencies inside of them. The nation state is never going to be
what it was.
Yeah. Right. So I mean, what I like, but it isn't just. Excuse me.
But while he's clearing his throat, I will say that that's not just the case, and I don't think that he was saying this, but it's not just the case with the United States. That's also the case with Germany, with France. In Romania and those Balkan countries, Germany and France are investing shitloads of money for their infrastructure, and they're hiring shitloads of labor in those countries because it's cheaper and the money still comes back to them. And I know that isn't necessarily what you were trying to say, but it's easier now because of the fact that nobody is tethered to this idea. It is much easier now to create one world order than it would have been in 1950.
I would say yes and no, though, because there has been this weird reactionary backlash. I mean, with Brexit, I mean, you bring up an interesting point with regards to the EU, right? Like, the EU was created in this certain way where rhetorically it was this one Europe thing, but there's no doubt that the financial positions in Brussels had a certain beneficial position. The industry in Germany had a certain beneficial position, and the way that the banks locked from France over into those spaces in Germany, which basically left Italy, Spain, Greece, in these totally fucked situations, or like you say the ones that were former Soviet satellite countries, they just want to have access to be able to work, so they migrate at that point in time. So they've opened up the borders to where they can go from one place to another. But inside of France and Germany, you see somebody like Marine Le Pen, in France, who's like, France first, we gotta, so there was it went from Brexit to Frexit,
and that's a weird thing because I think, and I don't know why this has occurred. Maybe because it's easy to scare people and to get votes, but this weird right-wing xenophobic shit is happening on a global level. I mean, Hungary shut their fucking borders down. France first, Brexit. And on some level, I don't really blame them because, like when I went to Germany, I preferred to use the Deutschmark, as opposed to the euro, because it was cheaper for me to use the Deutschmark than the euro. When I went to Romania, it was cheaper for me to use Romanian dollars than it was the euro.
So they were still. I didn't realize that they actually had other currencies that were actually.
Oh, fuck yeah, dude! And you can go. Obviously, now you only use the pound, but when you go to London, you can use the euro or the pound. Now, maybe that was their fucking mistake. Maybe they should have said, it's just the euro. If you want to be in the EU, you use the euro or nothing. And I just said euro. Maybe I'm hungry. The euro and not the euro.
So the euro. Maybe you're hungry. Victor Orban. Sorry.
Right.
Context.
And maybe that was their mistake, because then the euro ended up being devalued. And so the benefit wasn't there. And I can kind of understand why, Britain left.
Well, and now we're getting into some weird zones. But I mean, you think about like the Articles of Confederation. One of the big reasons why they came in and did what they did was because they needed to normalize commerce in the colonies, right? So that they needed to have a currency. I mean, they understood that. So yeah, I mean, it would have been a lot more. But I mean, again, like that's a tough transition, to go from. I mean, you need to you create an 18-month time period or something like that where you go from where you might still have some what's the lira, some
yeah.
What's the Greek currency?
I can't remember all of them. I mean, but the point is there, and maybe they were in some kind of transition, and that's why they had both currencies available.
That was recent, though.
That was in 2016, 2017, 2018.
Yeah, we're 20 years removed from the introduction of the euro at that
right.
point in time. So they should have found a way out of it to where, I mean,
maybe for Romania especially, because they had just been introduced to the EU.
That's a different,
But I know I was spending British pounds when I was in London.
Well, yeah, the pound never went away, though. The pound never went away. That was the whole point of the UK becoming a part of it in the first place. They were never a full member. They were only part of their position was that they would maintain their own currency.
Well, then why was Germany doing it?
They signed on for a different reason. I'm not sure. I mean, we'd have to
okay.
Talk to
So I don't want to go off base, and I don't want to talk about strictly finance, because I know you had some ultimate goal that you wanted to hit, at least during this conversation. You wanted to say something, and I keep fucking interrupting you.
No, it's okay. Well, I mean, I'll get there. I always get there at the end. I got there at the end last time, so I'm pretty sure I'll get there at the end this time too. So, the thing that you were talking about right wing. So you had posited a couple of things there that I think are interesting in terms of like the greater point that I'm trying to get at, and one was that you said that there's a greater possibility for one world order right now than there ever have been historically, and I think that was more true 8 years ago than it is right now. But that's only because of the rise of these. I mean, like you said, I mean, like Orban in Hungary, Bolsonaro in Brazil, Modi in India, the guy who's really calmed down in Turkey, I can't remember what his name is, but yeah, there's these right-wing reactionary positions that have developed that are really grounded in, I mean, Modi's all about Indian, India, Indian identity, India first, and that just sort of seems to be a tendency. So you had a tendency through the liberalization of markets, through the allowance of capital and capitalist entities to decouple from nation states, so that they shifted their production to these other places that were cheaper over the course of about 4, 5, 6 decades, right? And then you have the Trump phenomenon that responds in reaction to that. You look at the Steve Bannon circles where they were talking about the strategy in relation to that, which was helping to cultivate all those different spaces that turned into Orban and all the other individuals that were doing the same kind of thing. So you have one tendency going one direction and one tendency going the other direction, but the vast majority of citizens on the planet still, when they imagine social change, I mean, like what? So if you have this sphere that is existing above, where transnational capital is doing what it is that they want to do, how do I mean, there's a huge discontinuity between the way that our political systems reproduce ourselves and the way that these larger political economic systems reproduce themselves, where we have this fantasy that we can change them, but honestly, like, how much are we ever going to be allowed to affect change if it comes into contact with this new sphere that's existing over and above? And when I say the new sphere, I mean you use the term New World Order. Like, people automatically go to this conspiracy theory mindset. This is not conspiracy theory. Like, at the beginning of NAFTA, right? If Mexico wanted to be a part of NAFTA, they had to change. There were like 27 parts of their constitution that they had to change. They had communal properties that were called ejidos, and ejidos had to be removed from the Mexican Constitution because private property was going to be paramount. If you're going to have foreign direct investment coming from the United States and from Canada, because it's all of us, right? Then you have to be able to protect that investment, right? So there were certain changes that were demanded. There's a guy that I was reading when I was an undergraduate named Stephen Gill, and he talked about this thing called new constitutionalism and disciplinary neoliberalism. So new constitutionalism was that where you go in and you change the legal structures of countries to make sure that they protect the rights of capital when they're coming in. They safeguard that stuff. And disciplinary neoliberalism is it's the ways in which you force them to liberalize the markets. It's sort of like the way that the IMF, if you want money from us, and the World Bank,
right,
you have to do these things, and if you don't do them,
there will be fines and penalties and whatever.
And we're going to and as soon as we have you under that, the burden of that debt, then you're locked into that from here to eternity, essentially.
Yeah.
So.
No, so to answer your question, and this probably fucks everybody up if we do have, more than a handful of listeners. The answer is we probably can't make change. So another fairly shitty movie that I enjoyed was The Accountant with Ben Affleck, and he played this hitman who had autism. Yeah. But he told the girl in the movie, he said, you can't hide from somebody that can afford to give $65 million back. And what you're talking about is essentially people that own these markets, and these markets are everywhere. And we're talking about billions and billions of dollars that they do not want to be affected negatively.
Trillions.
Well, I was talking if you break down each individual company or
okay.
So these
whatever, that's fine.
We can't. I mean, if we start fucking with their money, then I have no doubt that they would kill us. The thing is that somewhere in my head, I think that, again, if we all banded together, because to kill 5 people is easy. To kill 1,000,005 people is more difficult. So I do think we can make change. That change may be small to begin with. And hopefully, it's that baby step sort of notion where, take a baby step and then you got to try to take another one. And again, I could just be a fucking romantic and that'll never happen. But if we don't do anything, then we'll never fucking know.
I'm down with the point that you're making, but there's a reason why when I started out, and I know it just seemed like a big tangent at the beginning, but so like all epistemological foundations have to reflect ontological realities. What does that mean? That means the way that I understand something has to reflect the way that that thing is in the first place, because that's what informs how I interact with that thing, right? So I would never say don't do anything, but I do think that it's important for people to sit down and be like, okay, so we know that if we just focus on voting on the president every 4 years, that the system will see us as being conscious about maybe social issues that we care about for a very short window of time.
Right, for 6 minutes every 4 years.
And then that window of time disappears, which genuinely demonstrates that you don't understand anything about how the system reproduces itself. So when I'm saying that, I'm not saying, and I don't even know that, like, I'm saying that, I do this and then that person starts doing it and then we're rolling down the hill and then it picks up, momentum and then suddenly we're a giant snowball and blah, 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 blah.
No, dude. And, as romantic as I am, I believe that we're all just Sisyphus. We're pushing the fucking rock up the hill forever. That's it.
That's actually what I refer to myself as. I have for a long time. Like, Sisyphus, when I came back from having COVID last time, I was like, Sisyphus is back, because it was never more obvious than it was at the post office, because you never, what is old Newman, the mail just keeps coming. It just never stops. It just keeps coming. You never get anywhere, You just keep pushing the fucking rock up the hill. But we just keep going in the same circle.
Yeah, we are. We're just Sisyphus. And I would like to try to make some change to where maybe as we push the rock, it gets smaller or something. And I know that that's difficult. But here's the thing, is that you mentioned voting for president every 4 years, because a lot of people are really proud of themselves for doing that, which is fucking stupid. But again, we went over those numbers when we were talking about voting, and that means that 18 million people didn't do it every 4 years. And that's just between 18 and 24. So we're not doing even the every 4 years thing, let alone the midterms and your local elections. Fucking local amendments and referendums are so important to everything that we do, because that affects this transnational capital to some degree, because those local people that we're talking about are the ones, like when Amazon said that they were going to open up a second headquarters, and all of these cities all across the United States started sucking Jeff Bezos' dick, and they were doing PowerPoint slides, and they're inviting them to fucking dinner, and they're saying this, yeah, no taxes here, and we're going to give you this building, and this land is going to be leased at only $1, and all of this shit that we kind of talked about in the corporate welfare part. If we elect the correct people, and when I say the correct people, I mean the ones that have similar beliefs to you, and put them in those local posts, whether we're talking state, county, city, whatever, then you kind of have some say as to what they're going to do when something like that happens. I mean, Nike was going to open up a plant, and the city of Golden started, wooing Nike, and they offered them a shit ton of stuff. I have no idea why Nike didn't open their plant, because basically they gave them everything. I think it was no taxes for 20 years. They were going to help house some of their fucking employees. I mean, it was just stupid, dude.
Maybe they just didn't do a good enough job drop smooch in the room.
That could be. I don't know. So, as stupid as it sounds, at the local and state level, you could possibly affect that transnational capital that we're talking about on a small level. I know that it's bigger than Amazon and Nike, but they're part of it.
So I get that, but this is where, again, I will circle back into, an understanding of how the system reproduces itself, reflecting the way that system actually functions. I will never tell you not to vote, but the way in which we divide our political system from our economic system is a way of insulating institutions like, Nike and Amazon from having any real accountability in the first place. So I mean.
Well, it's also the fact that we started treating corporations as a person.
Give me more than 13 seconds, okay? So we need to. See, now you made me lose my train of thought, motherfucker.
Sorry, dude. My bad. You want to just sit here with dead air for a little while?
Yeah. Go ahead and say what you're going to say about corporations.
No, that's all I just wanted to pop that in there because you were talking about the corporations again. So
no, I was talking about understanding something, and I hadn't even gotten to that point. What I was talking is you were talking about elections, and you were focusing on elections again because you love to focus on elections, right? I was talking about how you at least need to have a strategy that where if you're separating your political system out from your economic system, you understand that that's happening, which means that you don't over romanticize political activity. You understand right from the get-go. Now, having said that, I mean, what the right wing managed to do over the course of the last 8 years since the Tea Party shit has been nothing short of remarkable. I mean, they have effectively neutralized a ton of things in the United States by dealing with the judges the way that they dealt with the judges. So obviously there are things you can do. And stacking the Supreme Court the way that the Supreme Court is stacked. At least keeping parity in the Senate, so that the Senate, which you don't really need much of anyway, because you got Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema standing there identifying themselves as progressive people who are the most reactionary Democratic jackasses in the history of the universe. But the point is, if we keep circling back to, of course, people need to vote and everything. I mean, that sort of goes without saying at some point in time. But if the conversation keeps degenerating back into a space where, if everybody votes and then after they vote, if we don't get the change I want, then I'll say that I'm wrong. I mean, that's not really, that doesn't do anything for us. These people are highly creative. Like, we have to become, and we need to understand that there are going to be consequences for it if we're really serious about it. I mean, you need to have that sort of like Matrix Revolutions moment where the system is about to buckle on itself, because that's the only way that you're going to really get the change that you want. Where the analyst guy, what's his name? What did they call him in the second film? The dude in white.
In the Matrix?
Yeah. The architect.
Yeah.
So the architect, he tells Neo that you either come back in and do what we've asked you to do, and put your self back in, or we're going to kill the entire crop of humans, and we're willing to accept a certain level of existence. Well, that's obnoxious, and just like this system here, it's obnoxious. The system is predicated on us. This is where I absolutely agree with your numbers argument. It does need to have us.
Well, and so the only reason I mentioned elections again was because you were talking about the people that vote every 4 years, and I was just saying that that's not enough. Voting period is not enough. And then when I interrupted you and made you lose your train of thought, I was just talking about how basically they have made corporations into a person.
Yeah. Okay.
And that is kind of where, at least one issue lies, if not multiple issues. Because
I don't disagree. The point is correct.
If we can take that back and say, hey, you're not a person, you're a fucking corporation, then we can start treating that corporation as such. Because right now, those corporations have the same rights as a person.
Which is just fucking weird to even think about. I mean, especially because it's essentially just unionized capital. I mean, that's all it's socialized capital. So how do you roll that back, though? I mean, that they're never gonna. What was the
Well, that was so again, we're talking policy versus precedent, or actual legislation versus precedent. So the reason that came up is because it was a Supreme Court ruling, and that is why we are now treating corporations as a person.
But it was quite a while ago.
I want to say like 20, 25 years maybe.
No, I think it was quite
a bit. Well, regardless of the time frame, and if I'm wrong, I apologize to all of you.
No, I'm saying the only reason why I bring it up that way is because if the precedent has been, rooted for quite a bit longer, then it's going to be a tough thing to personhood. Yeah, 1886, Santa Clara County, Southern Pacific Railroad. That was the first time that they talked about it as being a person.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the United States Supreme Court versus.
That was the United States Supreme Court.
In Santa Clara, California?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then that was definitely fucking longer than 25 years.
This is the first time the Supreme Court was reported to hold the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause granted constitutional protection to corporations as well as to natural persons. So, yeah. So, the reason why I bring it up is because being that far back, yeah, of course, like, corporations are not people. I mean, boy, that was one of the smartest moves of capital that ever existed in the history of jurisprudence.
That is just fucking crazy to me, dude. And I guess it makes sense though, because the railroads were some of the greediest, cutthroat corporations, from back then. The only other ones that I could say were, on that level would be like the steel guys,
Carnegie's Peeps.
Yeah. Who was the DuPont oil guy?
Oh, I can't remember that name.
He Rockefeller.
Rockefeller was. They were Standard, weren't they?
Standard Oil. Yeah, not DuPont oil. Sorry. DuPont's a different guy, yeah. Chemicals. But yeah, same basic thing. So I guess it wouldn't surprise me, because back then, the railroads were stealing people's land left and right under fucking eminent domain, so that they could, do probably the cross-continental railroad.
Pennies on the dollar for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you didn't sell, then from what I understand, and a lot of this is based on movies and little clips that I've read from back then, but they might disappear you. Which again wouldn't surprise me, because back then there weren't a lot of laws. Like, you could shoot a guy for offending you without being charged for murder. Or maybe you were charged for murder, but you could just go to the next territory and hide.
There was that private. What was the
Wells Fargo?
Yeah, and there was There was another one too. But yeah, those guys, they just killed motherfuckers, dude.
Yeah. So you could hire thugs and have them kill people, and if you were a corporation with what would equate to now billions of dollars, it would probably be a lot easier to do.
It seems like in this day and age, the fact that much as we hate the surveillance side of everything through technologies, through cameras, so there, if you could manipulate that to where you were visible and they couldn't just, because it should be harder to disappear a person right now. I mean, your point about Assange a few episodes back, that I'd still argue that they probably wouldn't do it to him for a couple of different reasons, but they certainly have it in their power.
Yeah, but dude, so the guys that are in control of stuff, I mean, we're talking about a company or a country that has the technological ability to write a fucking virus that seeks out a specific piece of hardware used to spin fucking uranium and crash it. So we didn't even have to go to Iran to make that happen. We just fucking sent the virus out over the web. So how hard would it be to kill somebody and then fucking erase the CCTV or whatever?
If that were the case, then they would just disappear people anytime it was convenient. So, like for instance, right? I think there's a lawyer. His name is Stephen Donziger. He was, I think it was Ecuador. He went and sued one of the big oil companies. I can't remember what it's one of ExxonMobil or something like that.
Yeah.
Because the oil production that was going on in the Central American country where they were functioning, it killed a bunch of indigenous people. I mean, it was so like painfully obvious that the burden of proof was so embarrassingly easy to negotiate that he ends up winning like a $1 billion ruling against this multi-billion, I think, actually, when it was all said and done, against that specific oil company. I should go look that up a little bit more. But so Donziger, there's an appeal that happens, and when he goes to the appeal, they find him in contempt for some weird, like, it was like a contempt thing that they hadn't used since like 1836 or something like that. And it was something that had never landed anybody in jail, right? But they put him in jail for months over it. They put him in house arrest. He ended up being in house arrest, I think, for like 2 years or something. And they finally released him.
It was Chevron.
Was it Chevron? Okay. They finally released him, but nobody did anything. I mean, everybody just sort of, I mean, there's no reason, if you believe in justice at all, there's no reason why that guy belongs in prison. So, I mean, I acknowledge that power functions in a certain way, but like, this just, you don't need to disappear people. That draws, you can disappear Epstein. Epstein needed to be disappeared.
Well, you could disappear them in different ways. I mean, again, if you throw them in jail or house arrest or, whatever, these days.
I was thinking about killing. I mean, that was what, yeah.
Right. And I think you can kill some people, and I think they still do kill people. I mean, it just depends on who you are and what you've done, how badly you pissed somebody off.
But it isn't just that. That's not the only calculus. I mean, because, dude, Julian Assange pissed some people in power. I mean, the entire military-industrial complex wanted to drop bombs on that motherfucker.
Right.
I mean, they were not happy. Everybody that had did circle jerks with Dick Cheney. They were not in love with him. And then after it's funny, he made an enemy out of everybody, which really kind of makes me like him more. Because he was what he said he was. He was honest. If you're gonna pull some shit with some emails and try to force Bernie out of 2016, then I'm gonna steal your emails and somebody's going to give me your email. Dude, that's a different story for a different day. I mean, my God, those emails were like right out, and they're basically stuck in the middle everywhere. He just put them up there for God and everybody to see. But it's not just because he pissed, I mean, he's a person that I'm sure, like, somebody's sitting there going, God damn, I'd really like to kill that motherfucker. But everybody's looking. So there are moments where it becomes more difficult. Now, you're metaphorical disappearing him, obviously. I mean, the dude's he hid in Ecuador the embassy for all that time, and then he's in the UK for.
Well, so maybe that's what they try to do to begin with. So maybe there's steps in it. And this is, again, speculation on my part, but maybe.
Well, you don't know how the disciplining process works?
It's a process, right? So first, they discredit you. Then they hide you, punish you some way, put you in jail, throw you in the shoe, whatever. Make you be on house arrest and cut you off from the internet and all outside communication. And then if that shit still doesn't work, maybe they take one more step, whatever that may be. And if you still continue to be a pain in the ass, then you fucking kill them. I don't know. But I know historically they've killed people. I mean,
it depends on.
In Nicaragua, they trained entire forces on how to black bag people.
More now, Salvador. The death squads, yeah. Of course,
yeah.
I got you. I guess in both places they did it for sure. So. But it depends. So that brings up that was the point that I was going to go to. It depends on how you relate to the system of power in the first place. So like we brought that Luis Rosa guy to Metro, who was a Puerto Rican independence guy, right? And they were, talking all kinds of shit. He wasn't part of the group that bombed their legislature, because there were some independistas that did put a bomb off in the Puerto Rican legislature. But they were drawing all kinds of attention to Vieques and the way that they were doing the testing weapons on that island. And then something happened to where they were escalating it, but he went to, when he's 18, he went to prison straight and for 27 years. And while he was in prison, they kept trying to get him to roll over on people.
Well, and that's what I was going to say too. Maybe that's one of the steps in the process. If they figure out how to turn you and use you, then maybe they realize there's no need to kill you.
But they killed 3 of his family members in the process. So.
Yeah, and that's a way to do it too. Like, I always had these weird fucking paranoid fantasies that if I did something wrong, they wouldn't go after me, but they'd go after those that I cared about, right? Holy shit. I wonder if the mic picked that up. That was my stomach growling. Yeah, so I don't know whether or not, and maybe that's what they do.
Everybody has a weak spot, that's for sure.
Kill your fucking wife instead of killing you to shut you up. Cut her brake line and let her drive off the road. Accidents happen.
They do indeed.
I think toward the end there, and if that was my fault, I apologize. I know we kind of strayed from the transnational capital thing.
I think we did fine.
Okay. Then, we're coming up on 45 minutes, so I think we probably need to say our goodbyes and wrap things up. Once again, I'm Brian Courtney with Short Bus Debate Club. You can reach us on Twitter or via the telephone at 720-334-ROLL. Is that right? Is that
I'm Darren Jolly, and I really would rather not be disappeared. We just are hanging out and chatting, everybody. So trying to think it through. All right.
Yeah. Have a good day. We'll talk to you later.